So after thinking about it a bit more, I did manage to come up with an auto team for Hall of Trials. A big thanks to Rin for getting me footage, because I think Fenris is pretty much mandatory. He's the only unit that can really double S3, so his damage output is going to be by far the highest. And he also auto-tunes himself more or less with the way his mechanics, the Hall mechanics work, where he'll always S3 into barrier at the right time as well. So a big shout out to him. And those roles are pretty much the same. Roana's our healer, Fenris is the DPS, and you have two stripper roles. SPolitis is by far the best in slot in my opinion, because her S1 has 100% strip, so you could just run her skills off and she'll always strip at the right times. And the second slot is a second stripper ideally, but this person also needs to have some damage, because the barrier in the third phase gets pretty big. So if your Fenris gear isn't that good, you're going to need some more damage in this slot. A lot of units can go here. There's a lot of units with strips on their S1s. There's ROL has 2 strips, even if her damage might not be too good. There's Flan, which if you mold her S1, or if you haven't molded already, I wouldn't mold her S1 personally, but if you already haven't molded, her EE does give her to 100%. There's, aside from units with strips on their S1s, there's also mages. So GAither strip is on his S3, which is a bit hard to tune, but he does have access to a yellow violin. And Rin chose to use him for Yellow Violin and also for the heal on GAither's S2. Melissa's another option, since Melissa has extra turn on her S3 or S2. One of those skills has an extra turn in there, so she can get a bit more damage in as well. And stacks on Fenris. And speaking of stacks, let's go over the break phase before we get into the stats. So in the break phase, where pretty much all of your damage comes from, there's one thing you got to keep in mind when you're autoing, because when you're autoing, you're guaranteed to hit into Harseti. So if we hit her once here, this bar goes up, and once it hits 8 attacks total, she'll end the break phase. You want to save the last attack for your Fenris S3. And also, every time you hit her, the stat counter goes up. So it's 100 right now, and if I hit her a couple more times, it goes to 2, 3, and you should be able to get at least 4. One other thing is when you're autoing, sometimes Roana will use S3, so that could cost you a stack as well, because you wouldn't be critting. But let's just take a look at this. Once you hit 4, it'll be a 400% damage boost. And then if we go to 5, it goes to 500. I'm going to stall one turn. And then once you hit 6, it'll actually jump from 500 all the way to 1,500 instead of going to 600. So it doesn't scale linearly. There's very big boosts once you get past 5. So the amount of damage that you get with this auto is going to depend a bit on how many of these attacks you're able to get during the break phase before your Fenris uses his S3. You could get the 7 max, because this is the turn where you'd have the Fenris S3, and that would get you 2,000 damage increase, but this would require tuning of some sort, which is probably a bit too much effort if you're looking for an auto team, but it is just worth mentioning. First up is Roana. You need 100% crit chance for the damage boost stacks in the break phase, and you also need a bunch of HP and defense to survive. If this is too low, you can go a bit higher and drop some speed. Speed you do want a bit of, just so that you're able to get some hits in during the break phase, but make sure that you're not dying before anything else. Then for skill enhances, S2 and S3 are the important ones. S1 doesn't really matter. And then for the artifact choice, Shamadra Staff is best for healing. Touch of Rickos is a good backup if you don't have that. And then there's Fenris. He's just full damage, maybe a bit of bulk to survive if you really need it, though it shouldn't be too necessary. And like I mentioned in my other video, Torrent is really bad this rotation, so go crit set instead. He's plus 15 because this one's just in Grace of Growth. And then for artifact, you can do Dux Noctis is really good. If you don't have a lot of limit breaks in your Dux Noctis, but you do have a max POS, a POS is probably better up until like plus 24, let's say. Not 100% sure what the breakpoint is. And then there's SPolitis. This gear isn't super optimized, because you need 100% crit chance, but you don't need any F. So you could drop all of this F and just put it into crit damage and attack. And you also probably don't need this much bulk. The speed is nice, because it lets her lap more and get more strips in if your other strip doesn't proc for consistency. And she doesn't need any S1 molas, since she'll have 100% strip even without them. And then for artifact choice, the Warhorn for the stat damage boost, or if you really need sustain, you could also give her Bloodstone or something. And the last slot, GAither, you do want to make sure that you have enough damage to break the barrier. So he's on, as usual, just damage. Not too many skill enhances really needed. This is the EE that increases his healing, and then EL of Violin, so he has more strip. And you also want a good bit of speed to get the extra hits in during the break phase. And then if you're not using GAither, because not too many people probably have them built, whatever stripper you're running, it's just give them speed and a bunch of damage. As for where this is going to land you in the rankings, it's a little bit hard to say because it's the first rotation. For the second and third rotation, we usually have a much better idea of what score you need to hit certain rankings. But this run ended at 14 million points, and I have a picture from somebody who is in the top 3% right now with 10 million. So being able to score 14 million or higher should guarantee you the top 5%.
All your foolish choices have led you to despair.
Generous Rekos, please protect us.
Let's try again!
How annoying. Step aside. I have poured my will into this strike.
Light! Yeah!
What a pathetic joke.
May the light free you from despair.
I'm not gonna be gentle. The tip of this arrow will pierce you completely.
Destina's light! Help!
Until my final shot, I will never yield.
It's funny, really. The vanity of your struggle.
You underestimated me. The tip of this arrow will pierce you completely.
May the holy light save us all.
Let's try again!
Would you go ahead and die?
I'm not gonna be gentle. I have poured my will into this strike.
May the light free you from despair.
Destina's light!
The tip of this arrow will pierce you completely.
You outlived your usefulness. Now rest in peace.
Help!
How annoying. Step aside. Until my final shot, Will never yield.
Generous Rekos, please protect us.
I don't care for amateurs.
Let's try again.
I'm not gonna be gentle. The tip of this arrow will pierce you completely.
Yeah!
May the light free you from despair.
Poured my will to this strike.
It's funny, really. The vanity of your struggle.